So welcome everybody to the virtual winter learning series offered by ICEC. My name is Lily Jensen. I am the current board chair for ICEC and one of the folks that helped put together this series. We are going to do just a little bit of housekeeping stuff as we get started. So first of all, again, thank you for joining us. This is our first issue or session of the virtual learning series that ICEC has actually hosted. There was a race and environmental panel hosted last night by Luther College, but this is the first one that ICEC is in charge of. And so apologies in advance for a little bit of if there's any tech stuff, because we are just learning how to do these in webinar format. I first off want to thank our sponsors, the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation and the North American Association for Environmental Education have both generously sponsored this series and made it so that we could offer it free of charge and open to all, including non-ICEC members. So we are very grateful for both of their support. A little bit of Zoom etiquette for those of you that are new to Zoom. All of these sessions that we offer will have the Q&A enabled. So that is located on the bottom of your Zoom screen. It says Q&A, and we are asking that any questions that you have for the panelists today be directed through that Q&A. The chat feature is also found on the bottom of your screen, and that is available, but try to use that for conversations that you may want to have with other attendees, and anything that you want to go to the panelists will be directed through the Q&A. That way we can just keep things a little bit more organized to make sure that we get questions answered. Your video and audio is off and will stay off throughout the presentation. So that chat feature is the best way for you to interact with other attendees. This session is being recorded and will be made available for anybody to watch later, both through ICEC and through the Northeast Iowa Peace and Justice Center. And if you have any technical questions, use that Q&A to talk to Lynette, who is not on camera, but she is in the backside helping to manage tech for the webinar, or you can email her at that email address. That's not where I want to go. So I am going to turn it over. Again, I'm Lily Jensen on behalf of the ICEC, and I'm going to turn it over to Charlene, who is with the Northeast Iowa Peace and Justice Center.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charlene Bohr. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Iowa Peace and Justice Center. We're a nonprofit based in Decorah, Iowa. We create initiatives to promote peace, human rights, local resilience, social and environmental justice. The training today comes from the work of Peace and Justice's Pronouns Education Project. Through this project, we hope to educate folks on pronoun usage and gender identity. We want to normalize the sharing of pronouns and make sure our transgender and non-binary friends feel accepted, safe, and recognized. Thank you so much for choosing to participate today. I won't be presenting, or I'll disappear too from the screen for now, but return again during Q&A to relay questions to the presenter, to Rowan. I won't be alone in the task of watching for all the questions to come in. Maggie Anderson is here. She's the outreach coordinator for Green Iowa AmeriCorps at Winneshiek Energy District, and she's volunteered to help me field and relay questions. So now I'll turn the webinar over to our presenter today and the community lead of the Pronouns Education Project, Rowan Collins. Thank you so much, Rowan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rowan. I co-created this project with my friend who has recently moved away, so I'm the only one presenting today. So I'll just share my screen and we can get started. Okay, Pronouns 101. So this will be presented by me with the Northeast Iowa Peace and Justice Center. Okay, reminders, we went over this. The presentation will be recorded. If you have a question, type it in the chat or the Q&A section. Hateful and disrespectful behavior will not be tolerated in this space. If it happens, the person or people will be removed from the workshop, or the workshop will be ended. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point. We have Maggie and Charlene monitoring the chat, so thank you guys. So here is a land acknowledgement for the Native peoples. we acknowledge that the land was home to the Iowa, Sac, Fox, Dakota, Winnebago, and Ho-Chunk people whose relationship to this land continues today. We acknowledge that the Ho-Chunk people moved here from Wisconsin against their will, and in less than a generation, pressure from the U.S. government and immigrant settlers forced them to relocate again. We acknowledge that this land, once called the neutral ground, was created by the U.S. government to control the movement, lives, and livelihood of Native peoples. We acknowledge that the history of this area is directly tied to the dispossession of the Sac, Fox, and Dakota and the forced migration of the Ho-Chunk people. Now, let's talk about a brave space. So we all know what a safe space is, but my former partner in this project came up with this great idea of a brave space. That means that we all know we're not experts. We all make mistakes, and that should be understood and accepted. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. We all mess up, and I'm here willing to answer questions and talk as openly as I can. And hopefully this will lead to people thinking inclusively and a better conversation. So let's go back to basics. I love this little thing. This is called a genderbread person. I think it's so cute. It shows the difference between expression, identity, attraction, and biological sex. So in the brain is where gender identity is. Gender is not the same as sex, and it is really defined as our measure of masculinity and femininity in a person. So it has nothing to do really with what you were born as, unless you choose to identify yourself as non-binary or transgender. Here is attraction and sexual orientation. This has it has something to do with gender, but it doesn't really relate to your identity much. It is who you are attracted to, sexually or romantically, gay, straight, bi, pan, queer, whatever you want to call it. People choose to relate it to their gender, but it's not expressly related to that. Here, I think we all know is biological sex. It is what you were born as, and I will get into names for that later instead of saying things like biologically male or biologically female. Biological sex is related to the transgender identity. However, it is not the core of their identity, and it is important to remember that any questions about biological sex isn't appropriate. And I think we can all understand that, because I don't think anybody would like being asked questions, such personal questions, by someone they don't know. So that's very important to remember. And this is expression. Expression really has no bearing on identity at all. It's about how you dress. It's about what you like to express yourself as. If you like to be feminine, you can still be a man. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. It's just what you choose to look like. So what are personal pronouns? It's important to remember that they, she, and he are not the only options. There are others that stem from different languages and different cultures. These are often referred to as neopronouns. I personally have never come across anyone who uses them, but it is important to respect them as you would any other pronouns. Another thing to remember is that you avoid saying preferred pronouns, because that makes it sound like it's an option. It is not an option. It's personal pronouns is the best way to say it, because it's not a choice. You can't choose whether or not you say them. It's not preferred. It just is. Same with names. Sometimes I might say preferred name, but that's only when I'm trying to distinguish between legal name and the name that they use. Let's see. So while sharing pronouns, it should be encouraged. I'll get into this later. It's also optional. People have many reasons for not wanting to share their pronouns, and those should all be respected. There's usually some reason why, and that's fine. They have their reasons. Let's see. Okay, here's some stuff that's important to know. And this has come up before when I didn't really have the words to explain it, but now I think I have the words, I can put it into words here. So people have asked me why saying a gay or a transgender is offensive compared to saying gay or transgender. So this is because transgender or gay are adjectives, similar to saying that a blonde woman or a brunette woman. So when you say a transgender, it takes a descriptive adjective and turns it into a defining noun. And it makes it sound like their personhood is second to their identity, which is never true. It's similar to the word transgendered. The ED sounds like it's something that is being done to someone rather than something that they are. I've mentioned the words instead of biologically male or female. The ones most often used are AFAB or AMAB, assigned female at birth or assigned male at birth. They identify versus they are. This goes back to the idea of preferred pronouns versus personal pronouns. They identify, once again, makes it sound like it's an option, or it's like something that you can choose whether or not you want to look at and respect, or like it kind of puts more emphasis on what they were before rather what they are, because in most cases it was always that they were transgender or non-binary. It's just, but they identify once again makes it sound like it's something that they chose later in life. And I already said this, but once again, personal pronouns not preferred. That goes back to oh, and then the other thing is that I should put on here is gender affirming surgery is generally what you would want to say over sex change, because once again, sex change kind of reduces them to their biological sex and puts so much emphasis on what they were before, or what they were considered to be before they came out and came into themselves, and it reduces their personhood, and it also makes it sound like something that was done to them rather than something that they wanted to do to really come into themselves and feel more comfortable. So why are pronouns so important? Some people wonder, is it really that big of a deal? Yes, pronouns, in some people consider pronouns to be equally as important as names, and they are a way to avoid misgendering people in multiple ways. So if you know somebody uses they, them, you would not call them ma'am, you wouldn't call them miss, you wouldn't call them a lady. So now you know not to avoid those words, similar if someone is a man. So they kind of tell us a lot about a person and what words they, by default, you should assume they're not comfortable with unless they tell you otherwise. And something that you might want to think about is, how would you feel if you use she, her pronouns? If you are a woman, how would you feel if suddenly everybody started referring to you as a man and calling you he, him, and saying like sir or mister? And then when you brought it up to them, they're like, oh, well, I mean, it's not a big deal. Well, to you, it would be a big deal, wouldn't it? Because that is a part of who you are. So what do I do if I use the wrong pronouns for someone? I mean, it's going to happen. Let me go back. Sorry, it's going to happen. It happens all the time. Sometimes you've known someone for a long time and they switch and it's in your brain and you have to change the script in which you talk to somebody. Yeah, so what do you do? I think a big thing that people do that is they make this mistake is that they try to make excuses and they try to over-explain themselves. You don't want to turn this into a conversation. It's a simple, like she, sorry, he, or he, sorry, they, and then you move on. You don't say like, you don't say, oh, I've known you for a long time, I'm trying, like it's just so hard. That turns the conversation over to yourself, and it also makes the person feel like a burden. which it's not, you shouldn't make them feel like a burden. You shouldn't make them feel like it's such a huge deal for you to change the way you talk about them, because that's embarrassing. So just simple he, sorry, she, or he, and then oh, she. That's fine. They know you're trying. Everyone knows you're trying. It's just actions speak louder than words. And if somebody corrects you and says, "Oh, it's they," be open to that. Don't. It's not meant to be offensive or be like a jab at you. It's just like, "Oh, you made a mistake," and that's fine. So here's how you practice. Usually what we used to do is kind of turn to the person next to you, but obviously we can't do that, especially with so many people. So here's just a little script for you if you want to practice with somebody else or you want to practice by yourself. So when you introduce yourself to someone, if you feel comfortable doing so, you can say, "My name is blank and my pronouns are these." That's kind of, if you're starting a presentation, if you're talking to someone new in a professional setting, that's great. You can also ask, "May I ask what pronouns you use, or what are your pronouns?" That way people feel more accepted and they feel safe. Because when you extend that, it's kind of telling them like, "Hey, I'm an ally and I will respect your pronouns." Because otherwise people can get incredibly nervous. Like, I don't know how people are going to react if I tell them my pronouns. I don't know if they'll be really angry at me or if they'll react very poorly. So it's kind of like an olive branch. It's kind of like extending and being like, "Yes, this is okay. I would love to know your pronouns, so because I don't want to misgender you." And there's also a website called practicewithpronouns.com. And it's kind of like it's almost like Quizlet in a way. And you can choose from a variety of pronouns and practice using them in their form, in their like grammatically correct form. And for people who would like to know, with they pronouns, because technically people are used to them being for plural, you would still conjugate them in a similar way. So instead of like he is, it would be they are, and things like that. You'd still conjugate them correctly. So it might sound a little strange, but it would sound stranger if we started saying they is, honestly. So how can we support our trans and non-binary coworkers and students? Share your own pronouns on both formal and informal settings, email signatures, name tags or pins, business cards, put it in your bio and social media, put it on your name in the on Zoom. Correct others. You are in a position where you kind of have that power because you are an ally, where someone who is trans or non-binary might feel unsafe correcting others or embarrassed. So you can step forward and correct your friends or your coworkers to once again extend that and say like, "Oh, you're safe with me. I'll help you." Use inclusive language. Instead of ladies and gentlemen, say esteemed coworkers, like something neutral. People instead of girls and boys. Ladies and gentlemen. In like onboarding paperwork, instead of saying he/she, you can just say they. It's a gender neutral pronoun. It's all encompassing. It's easier, sounds clearer. Practice using the right pronouns with yourself or others. Don't drown out the voices of those who are talking about their experiences. When it comes to the experience of being trans, obviously someone who is trans will have the best the best knowledge about that, and it's important that even if you are an ally, you won't talk over them, because their thoughts and feelings about this are the most important. And one more thing, this is something that a lot of people need to be reminded of, and this is super important. Being an ally isn't really something that can be claimed. And it's not a pass that will excuse any behavior. So you can't play the ally card when you do something that someone finds offensive and say, "Well, I'm an ally." part of being an ally is taking that criticism and trying your best not to offend anyone when they say that they are offended. So it's not really a card that you can play, and it's not something that you can just claim you are, especially when someone's saying, well, this is an ally behavior that you are showing. Okay, a template for students. So if you are with a new classroom of students, this is a great way to make them feel comfortable with you. I don't know, but a lot of teachers will put out a little paper that's like, tell me about you. And if you do, this is a great thing to include. Ask them what their legal name is, so you know what it is on your roster. What is your preferred name? So what name do you go by? And then you can change it on your roster so you know. Ask them what their pronouns are. And then for their own safety, ask them if it's okay to use those pronouns in front of other teachers, students, or their parents. Because in each one of those relationships, there's a different dynamic. And parents sometimes aren't accepting. They might be embarrassed to say it in front of other students for fear of being bullied. So maybe this is just a stepping stone and they don't know quite yet, and they're asking to have a relationship with someone where they can hear it coming from someone and see if it feels right. And this just offers a place for them to feel safe, so they know they can trust you with this stuff. So here are some resources if you're interested. Mypronouns.org really just sums up a lot of what I said, and is just like a very clear, great resource that's just right there about pronouns. -18, that's a pronoun app. I haven't checked it out in a while. I believe it's similar to mypronouns.org. Oh wait, no, sorry. I believe it's similar to that. It's like a that Quizlet thing where you practice with the pronouns. It's a great resource. This is Trans Ally Resources, a way for you to understand a little more about the position of being an ally to people. This is a great, if you're interested in the history is fascinating when it comes to non-binary genders. It really gets rid of this idea that they are a new fad that's just started to exist in the age of the internet. It's not true. What are gender pronouns? Another great summary. And then also another great summary. More resources. This is the science behind being transgender or being non-binary, because there is some very fascinating science when it comes to chromosomes and SRY receptors, if you're interested in that. And this is, well, we're out of 2020 now, thank God. But this is a summary of the violence against transgender and gender nonconforming community in 2020, which unfortunately skyrocketed, and it was very bad. And then this is the land acknowledgement. And once again, mypronouns.org. It's great. Really would check it out. So a link to the feedback form will be sent to the chat. Please tell us what you think about this, things we could do better, things we did well. The webinar will be available in this link on the Peace and Justice Center's YouTube channel. So thanks to everyone who made this happen. Thanks for Lillian and Lily for helping to set this up. Charlene for her help as well, overseeing the project. Charlene and Maggie for monitoring the chat. And thank you to all of you for showing up and listening. Are there any questions? I think I saw a few.
There are. I will start. I think I will start with one that came in near the end. Just a quick clarification question from Black Hawk County Conservation, Rowan. When you were talking about the template for students, ways to go about inquiring their pronouns, the question is, should that template for students be personal, not preferred pronouns when you go to ask the student?
Yes, personal is always what you would want to say. Did I write? Oh, I just said, what are your pronouns? So yeah, what are your pronouns? What are your personal pronouns? Either one of those is good.
Okay, next question from Blackout County Conservation again. What are other ways to address an entire group besides the typical guys or ladies and gents, etc.?
Everyone is a good one. Just like, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. Honestly, it depends on like your relationship with the people, like what the context is, coworkers, there's always like a gender neutral version of any group. So coworkers, colleagues, anything like that is great. I can't think of any in like some specific contexts right now. I should probably think of some more.
And another question from Blackhawk County Conservation. Also, what's a way to address sir, ma'am, Mr., Mrs., Miss in a formal setting?
So I actually don't know if there's any version of what was it, ma'am or sir. The gender neutral version of miss or Mr. is mix, MX. So that is how you would address someone in writing or in person. It would be like mix Rowan. Yeah, but I don't know ma'am or sir.
Okay, yeah, kind of to add on to that, there's someone in the chat wondering, they've heard new pronouns are starting to be used by non-binary people that start with Z to overcome the issues of people bothered by use of they/them. What is the status of this?
I'm not sure of the status. I know that it's always been a thing. I'm not sure what language it derives from. I'm going German maybe. But I think that it's used the same amount from what I can see as it was before. I think people are honestly becoming more comfortable with they, them because the idea that it is grammatically incorrect has been debunked by MLA and I think APA as well, and also just the history of the word. So I think people are becoming more comfortable with they, them, but it's also, it still remains, these neopronouns do remain highly debated within the community on whether they are necessary or valid. So I would just say, if you come across someone who uses them, just use them. But I don't know the status of whether it's gone up or down.
And a question from Tiffany Morgan. Does avoiding the use of identify as still allow for a gender fluidity, or how to best allow room for the fluidity?
So by gender fluidity, I don't know if you mean gender fluid, the identity of gender fluid, or the idea that people often change their identities. So the thing is with identify as, it is something to avoid in general, but some people do prefer it. It's like I'd say the vast majority of people are okay with it, but it's something that we want to move away from just to like get rid of that implicit idea that it's something that people choose instead of they are. But yeah, I mean, people who often switch what their identities will sometimes use what they identify as, but at the time, whatever they do identify as is just what they are at the time. And if they change their mind later, then what they are then is what they are. I hope that answers your question.
Tiffany just said thank you in the chat, Ron, if you haven't seen it. Are there any other questions out there? That's all that has come in thus far during Q&A, or I should say in that section of the Zoom box.
I have a question.
Sure.
Rowan, what do you have any insight on people who use two sets of pronouns like him/they and?
That would be, I mean, people use words for it that I don't know. So a good example of that is Elliot Page. They just came out. So that's actually surprisingly common, and it's It just kind of is. And when you do, a good thing to know is that when you are addressing someone like that, don't just use one set. They do prefer both. So to make them feel most, a lot of people will just use the binary pronoun because they find it easier, but that's not fully accepting their identity. So it's important to change the set you use, like change it up so that you're addressing both aspects of their identity.
Anything else out there for questions? I don't know if you're reading in the chat, Ron. People are saying many thanks. Thank you. Great session.
I have not been in the chat.
All right, we're here to let you know. Any other
I
questions?
use Friends from Lily Jensen. I use Friends a lot for younger students, but it does get a little more awkward with older students and adults. I mean, I'd love to be called Friends. I'd love to be called friend. It depends on your relationship with the person, once again.
We have a thank you from Amy Loving. It's kind of fun to narrate this.
Someone said, I love y'all as that's a great one. I think everyone loves the word y'all. I've never met anyone who doesn't like it. So that's a great option.
That's the one I tend to use when I'm communicating with people, y'all, or I did in the intro.
And I still use it.
Yeah, and I did in the introduction, I used folks.
Folks, yep.
That's the farm girl in me, kept the folks going, although I spelled it with an X, which one?
Plural is all y'all, yep.
Oh, thank you, Lynette. Blackhawk County Conservation says we have sometimes used nature-related things, but sometimes people get confused. Can you speak more to that, Blackhawk County Conservation? I'm curious about nature-related things. Can you give examples? Would you mind? Oh, okay. Like groups of animals, for example, the murder of crows or a herd of bison. Okay.
I think that's nice. Calling someone hello to the herd, the pack. I think that's fun. Anything else?
Well, if there aren't any other questions, I'll pipe up here and say that Peace and Justice, our programming, we always benefits from participant feedback. So now I'm going to pop a link to our feedback form in the chat box. And we'd welcome you, y'all, all y'all actually, to take a few minutes to tell us about your experience. So thank you. I'll pop that in here in short order.
And while you wait for that, well, there's that link from Charlene there in the chat. On behalf of ICEC, I want to thank Rowan. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insight with us. This was hugely helpful and informative and welcoming, and we can't thank you enough for being here. Charlene and Maggie, thank you for your support in providing this opportunity for us here through ICEC. And then attendees, thank you everybody for coming and attending and joining ICEC on this journey through this virtual learning series. There are more coming down the road. The link that you use today to access these webinars will be the same for any of these other live webinars that we are hosting. You can always go to the Northeast Iowa Peace and Justice Center's website to find out more about the Pronouns Education Project and their work in general, and then to ICEC's website to find out more about this series and the work that we are doing. As I did mention, we are able to provide this series free of charge through some sponsorships. Those sponsorships, of course, don't cover everything. So if you are willing and able, any financial support to help cover those additional costs or becoming a member of ICEC is always appreciated. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We will hang out here for just a few minutes in case there are any questions. Otherwise, we will see you hopefully again at the next ICEC Winter Learning Session.
And I'll just say thank you, Lynette, and all the participants, and Lily too, for inviting us to be able to present this topic to you all today. And thank you, Maggie, for your help also.
Thank you, Black Hawk County, for all your questions. They're very good ones.